Hello and welcome back to Tetra Football, and today I'm going to be predicting the next 20 clubs I think are going to get promoted to the Premier League. The first one of which I'm going straight in is with Leeds. I think that they have to be in the next 20 to get promoted back up. They can't go another 16 years not getting promoted to the Premier League. I mean, they're such a big club. They deserve to be in the Prem. Their fans have suffered enough, so I do think we will be seeing Leeds back in the Premier League quite quickly. Following that up then, Southampton, same reason as Leeds, more or less, because I think they've got a good enough team to come back up as long as they don't sell too many players. Even if they get rid of James Ward-Prowse, I do think they've got enough for likes of Sulemana, Bella Kotchap. They might lose Lavia though, but they've still got the likes of Kyle Walker-Peters if he stays. So yeah, I think Southampton have got enough quality and we'll see them back in the Prem fairly soon as well. Following that up, the same goes for Leicester, except a little bit of a different situation. I do think they're good enough to find themselves promoted again, but with Leicester and their finances after COVID, I feel like if they don't get promoted back to the Prem, they could languish in the Championship and maybe even go down to League One if they're not careful. So I do think Leicester will find themselves back in the Premier League, at least one of the next 20 teams to do so. But if they don't find a way back up soon, I think they could be in trouble in the future. Following that up then is Sunderland. They've got a young team. They might not have Amad Diallo next season, but I think overall their squad is young enough, already showing quality, and they're going a good direction under their manager. So I think in the next 3-4 seasons we could definitely see them in the Premier League as that squad matures. Following that up then is Wolves, and you're going to see a couple of current Prem clubs in here because I think some of them are going to get relegated and go back up before other teams come up for the first time or first time in a while. So the first one of those teams I put in there is Wolves. This isn't necessarily in order, but I've gone for Wolves because they're a bit of a stale squad at the moment, and it could be in 2 years' time if they get relegated next season in the Prem, because they've just sold Neves. They're not really investing that well in the club at the moment, so I could see Wolves getting relegated, but I do think that they're run well enough as a club that they'd be able to find a way back up. Following that then is Bournemouth. Similar reasons, we've already seen what happens. They go up to the Prem. They seem to do alright for a few seasons, stay up a while, but eventually they got relegated like we saw with Eddie Howe in his time there. He got them up, kept them there for a bit. They did get relegated in the end, but after a few years they bounced back, and I think that is going to be a similar thing from Bournemouth again. I think they've got the ability to stay in the Prem for quite a few years, and I do believe they're well enough run that if they do get relegated, they can come back up quite easily. Following that up then with the trend of Premier League clubs and going for Everton, and I think Everton are one of the clubs on this list that could benefit with a relegation actually, because they need that period to refresh, rebuild themselves, and like Burnley have done really, come back into the Premier League with a refreshed, rejuvenated approach that could see them actually push on up the table. Following that up then is Fulham, and they're just a bit of a yo-yo club really. They did just have a really good season, but my worry would be for them that they might be Sheffield United again, where they came like 9th and then got relegated next season. We could see that again from Fulham, but I do think they're set to stay in the Premier League for quite a few years this time, but eventually they'll get relegated and will need to come back up. Following that up then is Sheffield United. I think they look likely to get relegated next season, but I think if they do get relegated, they could easily come back up again in a few years like they've done this time. Following that up is Plymouth, and I don't know too much about Plymouth, but I've seen a couple stuff from their fans saying that they're a good young team, so I figured if they can survive in the Championship, then maybe in a couple of years they could build themselves up and find themselves promoted. It would be interesting to see. Following that up then is Ipswich, and I know they're a former quite big club, and I figure they did just get promoted to the Championship, so if they can survive the Championship in a few years' time, I reckon they'd be good enough to build and sort of get into promotion playoff places and eventually find themselves in the Premier League. That could be quite a while though. Following them is going to be another sort of fallen giant, and it's going to be Bolton. And they've got a big fan base. I've heard they're also one of those clubs with quite a young team that they can build on. So yeah, I think in maybe 5-10 years time still, if they keep building, they could eventually find themselves back in the Premier League. Following that up then is Middlesbrough, and I mean, I just think simply they were close to promotion this season. I mean, that could mean they end up falling off and drop off like Huddersfield did, but I think Middlesbrough are a solid enough team where they can be around the promotion players for a while, until they eventually push themselves up. Next up then is Blackburn, and former Premier League champion. I think they got close this season, and eventually, despite losing Brereton Diaz at the end of this season, I think eventually they'll be able to do enough to find themselves promoted again. Following that up then is Swansea, and to be honest, I wanted one of the Welsh clubs to be back in the Premier League again because it's just different than the All English clubs. I think they might provide something different, not too sure on it, but it's just interesting to see different teams. And Swansea, it's been a while since we've seen them in the Prem, so it could be refreshing to have them back. And yes, this is the only Welsh team in this video. Wrexham, I don't think you're going to be in the next 20 teams to be promoted, but I think soon after that we could see Wrexham in the Prem if they keep getting run the way they are currently. Following that up then is going to be Burnley, and I think under Company they'll come up and they'll stay up for a while, but eventually their project will fall apart, they'll go back down, but they're solid enough as a club to bring themselves back up. Following that up then is Norwich, another yo-yo club, and come on, we all know they're going to get promoted to the Prem eventually and then probably get relegated again. Sorry Norwich fans, but it's just true, you are a complete yo-yo club, but at least unlike other teams you do get some Premier League seasons and you do get to dominate the Championship every few years. Following that up then, Nottingham Forest, and I actually think they'll be able to stay in the Prem for quite a few years, but I think they're another one that eventually we'll see them get relegated, but they should be able to climb their way back up as the big club that they are. Following that event is Coventry, another team who were close to promotion this season in the playoff final against Luton, and yeah, I think that eventually they'll have enough to finish their fairy tale story of their own and find themselves promoted to the Premier League, where I think they're in 1970s, 1980s. I think we'll see them, the Sky Blues, back in the Premier League sooner rather than later. And finally, for this video, I wasn't really sure who else to include, but I went for Sheffield Wednesday. I just think that they're from one of the biggest football cities in England, from Sheffield, and I think eventually we'll see them swap places with Sheffield United. I've heard a lot about Sheffield Wednesday being a really big club, and I think it'd be interesting to see that Sheffield derby in the Premier League one day, so I'm almost hoping that Sheffield Wednesday will be one of these teams to get promoted. Anyway, that is the next 20 teams I think would be promoted. That doesn't mean they are going to make up a whole 20 in the league, but I do think they will be the next 20 promoted. A bit of an interesting prediction to this one. Let me know some of the clubs you think could find themselves promoted reasonably soon in the comments down below. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.